We're on number 10 on the lesson analysis, and we're talking about how will you engage students. So here's a slide that gives you a little push on number 10. Number 11 asks you to explain how students will be grouped throughout the lesson and for you to explain why you made those choices. In our driver's ed lesson, we have some whole group activities, like when we do our presentation of the first 5 road signs and we show the slide and ask students to predict in writing what they think it means, and we call on people or ask for volunteers to explain. That's a whole group activity. So I need to explain, well, why are we going to do the whole group? And why do we think it will work whole group? And then we also have some small group activities we'll be doing. So I'd explain how I have students grouped, how many are in each group, and why have I chosen to do that activity small group. For our driver's ed lesson, it's the puzzle that they dump out of the envelope. Well, everyone needs to interact with that. They need to touch it and slide the pieces around. And if I have 10 people in a group, there's going to be 8 people not doing anything. But if I have 2 people in a group, both those people are going to be doing something. So that's my choice. I want to do small groups. Maybe I'm going to do pairs, or maybe 3 at the most. And I'm going to keep the number small so that not only can they all interact with the materials and all have a hand in solving the puzzle, but if it's a small group and I have some questions for them to answer, then they're more likely to talk because there aren't 10 people and everyone will have a chance to participate. So you think about how you've divided kids up, and then you explain your choices. And just like we've looked at the other things, it's super important that you look for ways to word your answer that will show that you're aligning your choice with your objectives, and or you're aligning your choice with these particular students and what you know about them. I know that 9th graders like to talk. They're super social. They also love technology. So I can tell you that in my lesson analysis, some of my reasoning will have to do with the fact that I know that junior high kids are very social. They like to interact with their peers. They prefer peer interaction versus interaction with adults. And I'm allowing that in a learning setting. And I might use technology because I know that they're interested in technology and they like to use their own devices and they find those engaging. And if I can engage them through a device and make them learn the content, then all the better for it. So you just explain your choices as best as possible. We're getting close to the end. We're now on assessment. So number 12, I'm just going to explain the formative. I won't be using any summatives for this class, so don't worry about that. What formative assessments am I using to determine whether all students have mastered learning goals? You've got these planned. You plan them on the lesson. So now you're just going to kind of talk about them in more detail. What am I using? Method can mean I'm using electronic assessment that asks these kinds of questions, or it could be I'm using a paper-based assessment that asks these kinds of questions. If you were actually sending this lesson plan and analysis to me as your assessor, then you would send me your assessments also. You would not just say, I'm going to use a formative assessment and I don't even have it. You would have made it. You will have sent it. I will see it 48 hours before that lesson. So I can read it and say, hey, yeah, number 1 through 8 are very well aligned with your objective, but 9 and 10, you are off. You need to fix those because they are not lined up with your objective. You need that feedback. So it's important that you get things done ahead of time. Number 13, how will I use my assessment data to plan for future instruction? So for this one, there are 2 things you have to do when you answer the question. Your answer has to include what you'll do for the students who do meet the objectives. Like for the students that do learn all 10 road signs and can explain all 10 accurately, here's what they'll be doing next. For the students that do not, are not able to, and you can put a number on it, if they're not able to name 8 of the 10 correctly, then here's what I'm going to do to get them caught up. So you're basically saying, I've got a plan to move kids forward, and I've got a plan to help the kids that don't understand as much as they could have or should have understood. So you just think about what you might do. These are not big, full, drawn out, long, detailed plans. It just shows that I have thought about what I'm going to do if they don't learn it. And I have thought about what I'm going to do if they do learn it. I've got a plan for those. Almost done. 14 and 15 are just catch-alls. Sometimes there's something special that you might want to say, hey, heads up, you should know this about the lesson. Or number 15, heads up, here's something you should know about the classroom environment. Like, oh, it's picture day when you're coming, so expect lots of interruptions. And that way I know going in, it's picture day, things are going to happen. So just a quick review. Number one, probably one of the toughest questions you have to answer. The key is go to your national standards, study and read, and then do not copy paste, use your own words. Number two and number three, you get to skip for this class. You'll learn about those later. Number four, this is objective to previous and future lessons. Keep them close, not years ago, not weeks ago. Try to connect to very recent, previous, and near future lessons. Restatement of your objective with a little bit of elaboration. List of your resources, explaining why you've chosen those resources. This is where you want to align closely with your objectives. Naming your method, explaining why you made that choice and aligning with your objective. Number 9, methods, materials, and activities. Why have you chose those for these particular kids? This is an appropriateness question. So your focus is on these students, ninth graders, if it's the driving ed example. Why have I chosen these for these kids in particular? Engagement, where do I feel like I really have them engaged with the content? Remember what engagement means. How am I going to group them and why? How am I going to assess them and why? And how am I going to use that assessment data and anything else you need to know? And that's the lesson analysis. At the end of this PowerPoint, I'm trying to show you how these are the test domains and these are the components of the test domain. I'm trying to show you how test domain 1 lines up closely with the lesson planning. So LA stands for lesson analysis and LP stands for lesson plan. When it comes to scoring these things and this as an assessor, and I'm trying to score you in domain 1 component A, where am I pulling the information? It comes from these pieces of the lesson plan and lesson analysis. For domain B, it comes from from component B. For component C, D, E, and F, and that's all of domain 1. So your domain 1 score in tests is built on the lesson plan and the lesson analysis and all the materials that you send along with it. That's it. For my undergraduates, when I go out to see someone teach, they send me their stuff 48 hours in advance. I read it all. There's no changes to be made. I'm like, I'll see you in 2 days. And when I show up, I typically have already scored them in domain 1. I already know the score for each of the components because it's not based on anything the person does in that room. It is based purely on their paperwork, which is why we've taken, 6 or 7 videos for me to explain this to you. Because if your paperwork is not good, you will not score well in domain 1. Even if your lesson is fantastic and you score high in 2 and 3, you could still be basic or unsatisfactory because you're not filling out the paperwork thoroughly and you're not showing your thinking, you're not showing alignment, you're not showing appropriateness, and you're not being specific about your choices that you made on paper, because that's where the domain 1 comes from. And why do we make you do this? Because we know that when you're hired as a public school teacher in Arkansas, you will go through the tests system and you will be asked these questions in an interview format. You'll have to talk about all the questions you're answering on the lesson plan and not necessarily just write about them. So the writing about it is training. Train your brain. We're going to wear a path through this grass until there's a nice clear path and you know exactly how to plan and understand. The lesson plan can be a real challenge to write. It takes much longer than you think. So don't wait to the last minute. And remember alignment. Backwards planning means this comes first, this comes second, then you choose this stuff based on getting everybody from A to B. And that's the right way to do alignment. So in addition to these videos, I'll send you some email messages and some attachments. I think that you're ready to go, and I'll be sending your group assignments to you also. Thanks for listening.